Hello, my name is Liila Cindy Febriola, my student number 057, and I'm going to present my analysis entitled The Fragility of Life and Unexpected Death in Robert Frost's poem Out Out. So, this is the material that I'm going to explain. First, introduction. There are background, summary of the poem, and then the starter to the issue, and the theoretical framework using Michael Rivatere's theory, and then the discussion and analysis from the poem using the theory of Michael Rivatere. There are unsustainability expression, heuristic and hermeneutic reading, and then the conclusion, and finally the theme. Robert Frost is a famous poet from San Francisco, United States. The man who was born March 26, 1874, published his first poem, My Butterfly, on November 8, 1894, in the New York newspaper The Independent. By the 1920s, he was America's most famous poet, and with each of his new books included New Hampshire, A Further Range, and Steeple Blush, and With in the Clearing, his fame and honors, including 4 Pulitzer Prizes, skyrocketed. Frost served as a portrait consultant for the Library of Congress from 1958 to 1959. In 1962, he was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. Frost is a modern poet in his adherence to language, in his psychological complexity, and in the degree to which his work is coded in ambiguity and irony. According to McFarlane, Frost's works describes human life, especially regarding social life and philosophical values. His works inspire many people to be better in their lives. He lived and taught for many years in Massachusetts and Vermont, eventually dying in Boston on January 29, 1963. Out Out is one of Frost's most dramatic and celebrated poems. It was written in memorial to a neighborhood boy Frost knew when he was living in Franconia, New Hampshire. Raymond Tracy Fitzgerald, a 16-year-old tween, lived on the South Road outside of Bethlehem. An article about his sudden death appeared in the Littleton Courier on March 31, 1910. Frost knew the boy well. Frost's children and Fitzgerald had played together. Fitzgerald lost his life from shock and heart failure on March 24, 1910, within moments of having his hand lacerated by a buzz saw. This poem tells the story of a boy laborer who works in a sawmill. The setting in the poem is an evening in Vermont. The scenery around them was beautiful and peaceful. 5 mountains lined up with each other in a backwards position. That afternoon, the boy worked overtime to earn extra money for his daily needs. He worked overtime half an hour longer than his usual day at work. When it was dinner time, his older sister called out to him and shouted supper. The boy was surprised when his sister said supper, so he lost concentration while chopping wood. The saw in his hand seemed to jump from his hand, was thrown and hit the boy's hand. He cried, seeing his hand torn. The boy told the doctor not to amputate his hand. The hand he used to work to earn money for his life was his only hope. But unfortunately, the saw hit the vein in his hand, which caused the boy to die where he worked. The people around who watched him die didn't care. They went back to doing their jobs as if nothing had happened. They think that death is a normal thing, so life must continue as a normal. After understanding this poem, it can be found that the issue covered is the fragility of life and unexpected death that comes suddenly without knowing the time, situation, condition, and to whom death picks up. The poor boy is a breadwinner of the family who unexpectedly has to suffer a sad fate at his place work. In addition, Frost also describes how human nature in responding to a death that happens to other people. This reason makes the writer eager to analyze the poem out to find out the issues behind it. A description of death and how humans are indifferent to the grief or the death of others, very close related to human life in modern times, where life seems to be readily appreciated. Therefore, a theory that is suitable to be used as a basis for portrait analysis is a theory that studies signs or semiotics. A theory that is suitable to be used as a basis for portrait analysis is a theory that studies sign or semiotics. In this case, I'm using Rifatar's semiotic analysis. The emphasis of Michael Rifatar's theory in relation with literary work is the understanding meaning of the literary work itself through sign. Whole the text in the literary works is a sign that have to be interpreted to know the better understanding of the text. Rifatar in his book Semiotics of Portrait suggests four main things that produce meaning. First, indirectness of expression. Second, heuristic and retroactive or hermeneutic reading. Third, matrix or keywords and hypergram or intertextual principle. However, the issue in Robert Frost's poem Out would be deeper analyzed only by those two approaches. First, indirect expression. There are displacing meaning, distorting meaning, and creating meaning. And the second, heuristic and hermeneutic reading. Heuristic reading is the first stage of interpretation. In this stage, the reader knows the structure of whole literary work, also change the poem language to common language with clear interpretation so that the reader is easy to understand the meaning of the poem. While hermeneutic is rereading of the poem, the second stage of interpretation meaning. It means that the reader combined with the first stage reading and understand all the interpretation in the first stage reading such as ungrammatical. And then the second is indirectness of expression or unsustainability expression. Displacing meaning happen when a sign have a change from one meaning to the other meaning. Generally, the application of figurative language such as metaphor, personification, and metonymy. And distorting meaning, Rifatar stated that distorting meaning or deviation of meaning happen because of ambiguity, contradiction, and nonsense. Ambiguity is a word or phrase or sentence that have a different interpretation in meaning contexts, while contradiction is the using of irony, paradox, and antithesis. And nonsense is a word that has magical meaning in context. And the third, creating meaning. Rifatar stated that creating of meaning is interpretation to meaningless language such as rhyme, symmetrical, and homologue in stanza. Example of creating meaning is enjambment, typography, and homologue. Now let's move to the discussion analysis. Heuristic reading. The sound of the saw being used was like snarling and cracking in the yard. The saw when cutting wood produced dust, and the wood will be used as a stove or firewood. The wood that had been cut smelled sweet when exposed to the wind. From there, they could see the scenery. Range of 5 mountains in a backwards odor. Under the sunset in rural Fairmont. The saw met another voice snarled and rattled many times. The rotating saw lamp free when not sawing, and when sawing, they bear weight. Nothing happened, all was fine, even though the day was almost over. It's done, stop your work. I hope they said it. So the boy could rest by giving him half an hour. The boy needs to be saved from his job. His sister, who was wearing an apron beside him, shouted, "Dinner!" Hearing the word saw, as if to prove the saw understood that dinner man, what dinner man, and that made it attacked the boy's hand. He definitely so excited for dinner, and accidentally the tragedy happened. However, no one could escape the work's accident. But Hans, the boy was shocked. He's so sad. When he raised the injured hand, as if he hadn't realized yet what happened to his hand, he's still trying to hold on, so that the blood not pouring out. Then the boy saw all. Mature to know, a boy forced to grow up by circumstances, doing a dog man's work, even though he was still a child. He saw everyone whine, "Don't let him cut my hand." And when the doctor came to the boy shouting, "Don't let him, sister." Unfortunately, the hand was so severe that it had to be amputated. The doctor sedated him, but he's dying, and took his last breath. And then the nurse was surprised that his pulse was gone. No one believed. They checked again and listened to his chest. Weak. Very weak. Nothing. And he died. No more what the other workers could do. Other workers ignored the boy's death. They returned to their work again. Out is actually an allusion, referring to Macbeth Shakespearean play and more importantly, the soliloquy spoken by Macbeth after his wife died. Specifically, the line out, brief candle, life is but a walking shadow is actually a metaphor used by Shakespeare to describe the brevity of life and unpredictable events in life. Of how the candle that represents life is bright and beautiful, but with a light breeze can be blown and out, just as life represents a shadow. All shadows exist because of light, but at some point the light will go out and the walking shadow will no longer exist, just like life and how everything has to end in a blink of an eye, just like a candle. This reflects how every living thing in this world is actually fragile. Though we get sick or die, because in this world, nothing is eternal. Like the tragedy of the unintentional death of a boy doing a man's work in Robert Frost's poem, Out Out. In fact, he is still a child at heart. Even adults often experience work accidents, they still have a fragile space in them, especially children. He shouldn't be there, but the boy has to work as a laborer in sawmill. His body has to be strong for the sake of the situation. But his soul isn't quite like that yet. He is still fragile, weak, vulnerable, and has not been able to face difficult and terrible things. The boy will earn more money to make ends meet by working half an hour longer than usual. That afternoon, just before dinner time, his older sister shouted supper to him. This is an early sign of sudden death in the boy. He was surprised to hear the word supper, and instantly the saw he was holding was thrown and finally fell on his hand. The boy undergoes a dying process, which is the process of starting to lose the ability of organism in humans, both to breathe, speak, and so on. The phrase, no more to build on there, explains that his bodily organs can no longer work. Here, again, illustrates how fragile the living things are in the world, especially human. In this poem, we can also get a picture of death coming suddenly and the process of quickly changing a situation that is inversely proportional to before. At the beginning of the poem, lines 1 to 6 of Frost describe the setting environment, which initially tells the beautiful and peaceful atmosphere around the sawmill, not showing the slightest sadness. However, suddenly the situation turned into a tense, tragic, and sad situation because suddenly death came and took the life of a boy who was working in the woodcutter or sawmill. Based on the description that Frost provides, Frost invites readers to prepare themselves because death can happen instantly without us being able to predict. Death is a necessity that will be experienced by every living being irresistibly. We're not the one that turned to their affairs. After witnessing the death of the boy, workers returned to work as if nothing had happened. And over time, humanity has become accustomed to death humans have in modern times. If they didn't die themselves, they wouldn't worry about it. Especially the death of a boy who has not had much contribution or existence to society. So that people assume his death didn't affect their lives at all, and they return to their normal routines. In addition, the condition of the lower class society adds the cause of this empathy crisis. Their life is to work, they just want to make money to make ends meet. So they don't care about the idea of health or death, especially the death of others who have no benefit for them. Displacing meaning. First, personification. In line system, both phrases are personification of saws that can jump like humans or living creatures that jump into the boy's hand. Basically, saw are inanimate objects that cannot perform activities like living things without human intermediaries. Frost describes death through the saw that death can come sooner than we think. And then line 1, 7, and 8. Frost personified the saw saying, snarled and rattled, as if to describe something bad was about to happen. It provides a contrast of panic and calm, life and death. The onomatopoeic sounds of snarled and rattled plus repetition and rhythm provide such a mechanical effect that it appears that this saw has a mind of its own. Coupled with the personification, it ran like or bear a load, which adds the burden of life that may be experienced by the child. I think it's very realistic and has a chilling effect because it's juxtaposed with the setting a place where, ironically, the boy is supposed to be safe. And then the line 18, neither refused the meeting, but the hand. Ultimately, all the speaker can conclude is that the boy and the soul had a meeting, which itself is an old term, since meeting is usually describes of meeting of people with other people, not inanimate object. So, the speaker cannot wholly abandon the notion of the personified soul, although he has already discounted such an idea or seemed to leap. He clings to its one possible way to explain the boy's otherwise meaningless death. In addition, the meeting between the boy and the soul was as arranged, that the boy would be attacked in the hand and he was fragile, unable to do anything. Semio, line 9. And nothing happened, the day was all but done. Frost used a comparison sign to clarify the picture of the pre-death situation and reveals that nothing out of the ordinary happened. Everything was going on as usual at the sawmill. Death can change a situation that was calm after death turns into sadness. And line 19 until 20. Into the passage above, the symbol is marked by the use of the word as a comparison word. Frost compares death and human desire. When death comes, humans cannot avoid it. Even though humans try as hard as they can, if death is destined, the humans will still experience it. Metonymy, in line 20 until 22. The injured boy holds up his hand as if to keep, or the life from spilling. The life represents the boy's blood, and the line tells us that the hand is bleeding and the boy's life is in danger. Symbolism. Symbols are found in the poem Out, starting from the title to several lines of content. In the title of the poem, there is a repetition of word out, which invites the reader to think that something is forced to go or end. The repetition of the word is used by Frost to symbolize death itself, which is the end of everything we do in the world. In line 3, sweet scented stuff, the quote refers to nature. It shows sibilance sweeting the smell of death of trees. Also explains to us that breathing, nature is alive. This is the sign between life and death. In line 11, in the piece of pottery above, there is the word half hour, which is a symbol of the short childhood experienced by the child because he is required to work to meet the needs of his daily life. Through this symbol, Frost also explains that human life in this world is short. Death is the next eternal human life. In line 19, the boy's first outcry was a rueful laugh. In the 19th line, Frost used outcry and rueful words, laugh. The words that Frost used as symbol of sadness about an unwanted death. When death comes, even scream as if to reject its arrival. Here also describes the weakness of a human being, because they often can't stand the pain of being injured, especially children. The boy laughs because he's caught by surprise what has happened is not yet real. He's in shock, thinking his hand remains intact when it has already been terribly lacerated. In line 28, the doctor put him in the dark of ether. Dark is symbol of death, disaster, misfortune, weakness, vulnerability, and death itself is often identified with darkness that comes, the darkness that humans experience after all world affairs are abandoned. And in line 25 until 26, don't let him cut my hand off, the doctor when he comes. Don't let him, sister. The boy's biggest problem here is not saving his hand, but saving his life. And symbolically, he also begging his sister to let him stay in the realm of childhood. Distorting meaning. First, ambiguity. In line 6, under the sunset far into Vermont. Some say that this is a reference to people. In Psalms, the image that this line creates is so soothing and contrasts with the first line, which can be perceived as being threatening. The phrase under the sunset is ambiguous. It can be interpreted as a soothing image for some, but for others, it may resemble an ending of something more than just a day. It can also be interpreted as the last day, the apocalypse, or more inclined to the death or the end of tomorrow for the boy in this poem. Contradiction. Paradox. Since he was old enough to know Big Boy, doing a man's work without a child at heart. Paradox is seen with the following line because it describes the boy doing a man's job. One might be confused that a boy could do a man's job, but he is a big boy. old enough to do the work. Perhaps. However, there is a chiding or sorrowful note that a boy was doing a man's job. His body was worked out to become a big boy, but his soul was still a child. He is still fragile, but has to be strong. And this is the exact contradiction. Irony, line 13 until 14. Somewhat ironically, it was his sister who distracted him from work when he offered the supper. The saw, oddly enough, seemed to jump into the boy's hand, perhaps as a result of the mechanical device and belt attached to it. Intending to stop working for dinner, the sister stopped the boy's life forever. Line 17 until 18. Frost expresses an irony to the conditions of life and death through the story of a little boy who clearly sees death coming to him, but he cannot escape, even though the death is not what he wants to. In line 19, Frost used the word rueful and love to insinuate the boy's plight. The word rueful has the meaning of sadness, while love is loving. So this condition is an irony condition, a child who should be loving, happily enjoying childhood, but he got the opposite fate because he had to experience difficulties and death at a young age. Line 22. The line above is an allusion to the living condition that occurs in the child. The word spilling can be interpreted as something that is spilled. Something that is spilled is interpreted as a condition of the child that is happiness, pleasure, and life in childhood that have been spilled, and then disappear into death. He appeals to give his life back. He is fragile and he can only try to survive. Creating meaning. Enjambment. Enjambment is defined as a thought or clause that doesn't come to an end at a line break. Instead, it moves over the next line. For example, the buzzsaw snarled and rattled in the yard, and mad dots and drops drove flying sticks of wood. Sweet-sounded stuff when the breeze drew across it. Frost clarified these lines, the peaceful and beautiful landscape, with the 5 mountains in rural Vermont that will be mentioned in the following lines, like the sanded wood, which will be used for useful activities in the kitchen, contrasts with the horror that will happen soon. He continued, from dust back to dust, which meant that the boy's death was imminent. Frost reminds readers the power of the saw by repeating the words snarled and rattled. The first 9 objective lines sketch the scene in which the personal voice of the speaker is heard for the first and last time. The 10th line, which runs on into the 11th and the 12th through use of enjambment. Call it a day, I wish they might have said, to please the boy by giving him the half hour, that a boy counts so much when saved from work. The speaker's attitude here is one of empathy and compassion and reason in stark contrast to the ending, where so much indifference to the boy's plight is expressed, hoping to save him. Frost employs a form called blank verse. This allows the poet to use iambic pentameter when he or she wants to, but the poet is also not tied to a particular format. So, what do we mean by iambic pentameter? An iamb is really just a pair of syllables, the first one being unstressed and the second one stressed. If you say "hello" out loud, you will hear the iambic rhythm, da, ju. In the case of iambic pentameter, you have lines with 5, penta means 5, of these iambs hanging out together. And then, the watcher, and he's supposed to cry. Blank verse just means iambic pentameter that doesn't rhyme. But we cannot say that this pattern holds up toward the poem. Just check out this line, for example. So, but the hand was gone already. While you do get an iambic pattern to a certain degree in this line, it's definitely not following the pentameter from other lines. So, what's up with that? Why would he employ such a regular, rigid form and then break it so completely? Well, in the case of line 27, Frost interrupts his own matter to let us know that something terrible has happened. You must stop reading the poem at the end of the word so. The punctuation and the matter interruption allow Frost to make his point of death in verse. The flow of the poem dies just as the boy is about to. This back and forth between a regular iambic pattern and variations on that theme seem like pretty appropriate choices for form and method. In essence, there is no exact rhyme structure in Frost's poem out, with the uncertain structure of the poem representing life in a way that is unexpected, by the coming of death and the innocence of portrait that depicts fragility. It becomes a major part of the poem. With the fragility of a boy who is still innocent, he must become a laborer and cannot escape the fate of death in his workplace. So based on the results of the analysis of the poem out by Robert Forrest, it can be concluded as follows. The results of heuristic ratings carried out in each sentence shows that this poem tells about the unfortunate fate of child laborers who died from being hit by a saw at work. Then, the result of hermeneutic reading is that the death is unexpected and how fragile this life is. All creatures in the world are actually fragile and weak. How death can strike anyone, and at any time, especially children who still have a weak and vulnerable nature. In addition, hermeneutic reading also indicates a crisis of empathy and modern society. The indirect expression or unsustainability expression contained in the poem out includes displacing meaning, distorting meaning, and creating meaning. The displacing meaning is shown by figurative language like personification, simile, metonymy, and symbolism. Figurative language that is often used in this poem is personification and symbolism. Distorting meaning is indicated by ambiguity and contradiction. Nonsense is not found in this poem. In this poem, ambiguous meaning is found, so that it can give rise to various meanings. The ambiguity in this poem is in the form of word and phrase. Contradiction is shown by the use of irony and paradox. In this poem, Frost often used irony as a satire to criticize the situation and conditions of the poor child laborers. And last but not least, the creation of meaning is caused by enjambment and rhyme or verse. Homologues and typography are not found in this poem. Almost all the lines in this poem are enjambment, which creates emphasis on each sentence included. So, the theme of the poem is empathy is the medicine the world needs. Extend sympathy, empathy, and compassion to others. High empathy is a crucial thing needed in this era. The condition of the lower class society is so sad. There are times when as humans, we have to help each other, right? Understand each other and respect anyone, especially those in need. Humans definitely need other people, no matter how successful we are. A little empathy is necessary, not only to help, but also to share the grief that others feel. Thank you very much for your attention. Bye.